Hi, it's Roger Hamilton with the next step within the Millionaire Master Plan, which is how do you follow your natural path. So within the Millionaire Master Plan, as I mentioned earlier, there is a lighthouse. There are a number of steps within it, and on every one of the floors within this lighthouse, there is 8 different paths which link to this square here. I'm just going to go into the square in a little bit more detail now so we can kind of see how it fits with where you are and where you're going. Now, first of all, the square, and the reason that there is the square is that we have opposites in how we go about doing things. The Chinese talked about this a long time ago when they talked about yin and yang, and we know this, night and day, male and female, that all things can be broken into polarities, and it's when you actually have the opposites that you can really find balance. And so within these opposites, there is a fundamental equation. And the equation is that wealth equals 2 things. One thing called value multiplied by something called leverage. And depending on which of the opposite ways you create value, which is either on the top or on the bottom, or which of the 2 ways that you create leverage, which is on the left or the right, all your flow in life will occur. And what I mean by flow is we could actually turn this from an equation into a diagram. If I was to share it as a diagram, it would look something like this. Think about water flowing. Water will always flow from high grounds to low ground. You need to have a height differential. And exactly the same value will determine the speed of flow of money. Because when you have a value differential, you know, if I said I'm going to sell my shoes for $50, if someone wanted to buy my shoes for $50, it means that they don't value the $50 as much as my shoes. They'd rather swap and have my shoes and give me the money. And as a result of that, because they value the shoes more than I do, it's their money that flows from them to me. Money will always flow when there's a value exchange. So when you know that, it's like, okay, so as long as I'm creating value, then I'm going to be able to create money flow. And that's true, you can. But there's 2 opposites in how value is created, as we'll see in a moment. And frankly, it's not just about the speed of money flow, it's also about the volume of money flow as well. And the volume of money flow will be determined by something called leverage. So for example, if I said I wanted to make $100 from shoes instead of 50, I'd have to do one of 2 things. I'd either have a pair of shoes that would double the value, so as a result someone would pay 100 instead of 50, or I'd sell 2 pairs of shoes, which means that I'd be now creating more leverage from that same value, and I've got a wider river. Now, there's also 2 opposites to leverage as well. And let's have a look and see what they are. So let's go back to the square and say, if we have a plan for the lighthouse, and remember, there's 9 different levels here. So you might be listening to this and already be really successful. You might be just starting in your first business, but all of this will link to you regardless of which level you're at. First of all, value has 2 opposites, which are either innovation, which is something that comes naturally for people who are dynamo. So a dynamo genius is at the top. You're great at starting new things. You're great at the beginning of new things. And you're great at answering the question, what? And you have a thinking dynamic, which is called intuitive thinking. Intuitive thinkers are the ones who have their head in the clouds. And so if you're at this level here, then innovation is something natural to you. One of the 8 profiles, which is this one here, is someone called a creator. And a creator is someone who naturally creates new products. It's what they do, that's what they do best. Many creators are out there still trying to run their own business. And if you're a creator, that's not necessarily what you should be doing. Other people can run the business better than you can. But as creators, they think they can do everything better because they just love getting started in things. But once you pass it on to other things, just like Richard Branson, he's got over 200 businesses that he's able to run by not running them himself. So he can keep on creating new things and staying in his flow. The opposite of a creator down here is someone called a trader. A trader is not a dynamo genius. A trader is a tempo genius. They don't have their head in the clouds. They've actually got their ear to the ground. And a tempo genius is not intuitive in their thinking dynamic. They're sensory. Like this is the difference of temporal lobe, which is at the back of the head, compared to the frontal lobe, the intuitive side, which is all about basically creativity as opposed to senses. Sensory people are not needing to be creative or innovative because through being sensory, the opposite way of creating value is through timing. You know, you don't need to create anything if you know when to buy, when to sell. If you know when to go back to the customer and provide the right service at the right time. So this is a very different type of person. Someone like a George Soros, who's a trader, can trade the markets without ever having to create anything. In fact, even more so, this person here, an accumulator, is someone who can actually create a system to accumulate, to collect. Someone like a Warren Buffett is much more introvert, as opposed to someone here, a deal maker, which will be someone like Donald Trump, who is always making money through the people as opposed to through the analysis. Now, so why they're left and right as well? And the reason is because in the same way that there are two opposites in our thinking dynamic, and I'll do this in a different color, so we have it, let's do it in black here. Thinking dynamic here, we also have got an action dynamic. And all of this work, by the way, is not mine. This is something which Carl Jung came up with a long time back. This is back in the beginning of the 20th century. And Carl Jung, he learned a lot of what I'm sharing here from the studies that he did of a system that goes back 5,000 years called the I Ching. In fact, the I Ching, which is called the Book of Changes, which is about how everything goes in flow in China, that was a book which was first published in the West by Carl Jung. And what you'll find here is that in the same way that this thinking dynamic has opposites, which is a yin and yang, there's also opposites on action, which are introvert and extrovert. So if we can say the introverts on this side doesn't mean that they just do everything on their own, but it does mean the way they act internally is more important to begin with than the way they act externally by connecting with other people. Whereas opposed to extroverts, where they will naturally be working through others. Remember we talked earlier about what, who, when, and how. There's a natural question, like left brain, right brain. There's a different part of our brain we're using when we're focusing at one particular area. And every successful person in business has always focused at one that they've done well. So for example here, an introvert who's creative is called a mechanic. And all the people that have created amazing systems, someone like Sam Walton with Walmart, someone like Ray Kroc with McDonald's, nowadays people like Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, they're more introvert, and people might even criticize them for not being out with people as much. But this is their winning formula. As opposed to the extrovert, someone here who's a star, very creative but through people, someone like an Oprah Winfrey, they don't need to be so focused at the numbers and the detail and the analysis because they're actually doing what they love best, which is getting into flow around people. Now, each of these two also has an opposite way they create leverage. This is the widening of the river. So you see that on this side, those who are more introvert focused, they have a way they leverage, which is something called multiply. And multiply, which is what the steel geniuses do best, multiply is being able to make things simple and make many, as opposed to this side here, which is magnify, which is not about making things simple. In fact, the people can't help but make things complicated, which is fine, because this is not about making it simple and making many, it's making it complex so there's only one. There's only one Oprah Winfrey brand. There's only one Donald Trump. And by understanding that these two here in the center, the Lord who's a landlord that can actually multiply out their assets and the cash flow they're generating from it is very different. Someone like a Rockefeller, someone like a Larry Page at Google, who's all about the system of cash flow, very different from the system of people, which is all about someone like a supporter, like a Jack Welch, who's a great leader, someone who's able to actually lead through the people, and instead of it being efficient, it's about being effective. Very different type of person. And one of them is asking the question, how can I do this without me? Whereas the other one is asking the question, how can I only do it with me? You have a natural path that when you follow it, allows you to be able to connect to the right team and also connect to the right pathway for you. Now, there's many different levels that we can go through in here, but let me just share one. We just put also here the summer energy, which is Blaze, which is how do you actually build a team that's going to support you? And there's a 1, 2, 3 formula that you can follow. Really simple. Which is take wherever you are. Like I'm a creator, that's number one. The most important person for me to find for my team is 2 across. 1, 2, which is supporter. Because if I can actually find a supporter here, then that's someone who's great with the people, so I'm not trying to be out with the people at the same time that I'm trying to actually create something new. And then, if I was to think of this like a stool with 3 legs, the next person, 1, 2, 3, would be the accumulator who would be great at my numbers, great at the detail, so I don't have to be doing that part. There's always a way to find a group of... You'll find the same with a star. A star, always all stars come alive when they find a deal maker that can actually do the deals for them and find a lord that's able to do all the analysis. And so it goes on with each one of these as well. That once you actually get a stable balance, your losing formula is someone else's winning formula. What you do best is what someone else somewhere struggles with and vice versa as well. So be really aware that once you actually understand there's a flow for you, then it becomes really clear that you need to build a team where you can allow them to be in their strength while they're also allowing you to be in yours.